I think that it ought to be necessary to demonstrate, in order to justify a law such as parental notification and consent laws, it should be necessary to demonstrate that there is a problem that these laws actually solve. Unfortunately, one side of this debate came at it with what you would call antidotes. And I need to link you to Concordance, who I tried to somewhat vaguely reference in all of this, and his video project, again, because Concordance did a Pitfalls of Thinking Anecdotal Evidence, which will demonstrate kind of the problem here. Basically, parental notification and consent laws never had to face the burden, and that strikes me as inappropriate, of demonstrating and proving, with data and not anecdotes, that it was common and widespread that teenage girls didn't notify their parents and tried to keep it secret, and it was causing problems. They never actually faced having to, prove at that kind of scale that there was a problem that these laws solved. And it's on that basis that I'm, willing to say something so controversial as parental notification and consent laws are a solution in search of a problem. It's precisely because of the fact that these laws basically are a blanket policy that is applied to all of society, and all of society is going to be forced through that same hoop. If all of a state, for instance, that has these laws are going to have to be affected by the same laws. Everybody in the state has to, abide by those same laws. So in order for a state to go through the proper procedure that would indicate that there was a need for a law like that and would justify the existence of a law like a parental notification law, it should be necessary that the people that are pushing for this notification law meet a certain threshold and burden of evidentiary proof that they have to bring to the table to show that such a law is needed in the first place. And unfortunately, in the case of parental notification and consent laws, I fear that, what has happened is that a few sob stories have enabled a bunch of people to basically enact a policy that affects whole states in a wholesale fashion, all at once, at mass scale, without ever showing that there was anything more than one or two sob stories, And that is a pretty massive problem. They should have been subjected to having to bring actual data to the table, and unfortunately, what we got was not actual data. Even if they had the plural of antidotes on their side, the other side of the debate also had its antidotes, that it could refer to in that whole thing. Terrible, terrible stories of abusive parents who did terrible, awful things, and this is why I feel the way that I do. It's like, you've never actually shown that teenagers have a predisposition towards hiding that kind of information from their parents. That's never been done. You've never had to actually do research into that question and show that it exists at a widespread enough scale that it would make sense for parental notification and consent laws to be enacted and on the books. It's messed up in a big and fundamental way, fucked up when laws are able to be enacted that don't actually solve a problem that has been demonstrated to exist to a satisfactory extent, who have been demonstrated to exist at a widespread enough scale that it would justify a law that would affect the whole state. And in fact, it strikes me that there ought to be a high burden of evidentiary proof that needs to be brought to the table to enact any sort of law that impacts the livelihood and lives of an entire body of citizens in a single state. To me, the pro, you know, parental notification and consent side of the side crowd failed to actually meet that evidentiary burden, and instead, had maybe one or two sob stories that they brought of parents, and it was like, yeah, but the other side of the debate can bring the same thing to the table. So, this whole thing was fucked up on that grounds, and I mean, I can't believe that there are people that are so fiercely defensive of it. I can't, because it's like they haven't met this threshold, and this is a very minimum threshold that they should be able to actually meet, to justify the existence of such laws, and yet they haven't done that, and so they've not done their proper due diligence in the whole thing, and it kind of blows me away that you still see people that are like, oh, the parents should be notified. Well, ma'am, miss, sir, all I can say is that you are saying that, but you don't have sufficient reason to say it, because you've never shown that there was a problem where teenagers didn't do these didn't tell their parents anyways without the state involving itself in matters. you know in order for it to make sense for the state to involve itself in matters like this and make it non-discretionary and completely mandatory, then that has to meet a certain threshold and burden of proof of a problem, with not antidotes but with actual data, showing that there was a problem where teenagers didn't tell their parents and tried to hide it at wide scale, and they not at the antidotal level, and they have never done that. They were never subjected to having to meet that evidentiary threshold. Thus, the sentiment of this channel of me is that parental notification laws are a solution in search of a problem.